So that's what I want to speak to about adults, because there's so many adults that when they pick up a music practice, they never even imagine the idea of sharing it with other people or getting in performance opportunities. There aren't the regular recitals for adult students, and many students are learning online these days, and there's not even necessarily a community for that. I at one point was trying to really foster an online adult community where we would have recitals, and it was very difficult to convince these adults the importance of these recitals. Many of them were just so humble, and that humility I love. They just wanted to be able to play music in their room by themselves. And I want to double back here to something I said earlier. I believe it was the last podcast about how when you get up and you perform, that can often be the best that you ever do, right? Like you see this quantum leap in yourself. You see that you're playing on an entirely different level. And what is it that creates that? I've postulated that it's the adrenaline, that it's the pressure, that, you want to sound good, and that motivation sort of kicks in and you have a heightened sense of focus. I've postulated that maybe it's actually is the energy of the people that are paying attention to you, even if it's a couple of people, that you can take that energy and harness it and sort of have more brain power. Many of us are natural performers, and so this happens very naturally when we get ourselves up on stage. But I also wanted to mention that there's another dynamic too, and that is also that many times we play better when we're by ourselves in our apartment. There is that component too. It's not as simple as just practice and then get up in front of people and you're going to excel. Some people, it really is that way. Like some people I've had students that are so ill-prepared, but the minute they get in front of people, they just play well. And those, I would say, are truly natural performers. And many of them were on the spectrum, and they had absolutely no qualms, no inhibitions about being in front of people. There was no holding back. It was not at all a part of their personalities. Some Asperger's and, different sort of diagnoses, I've seen that to be quite common. But there is another side to it where if you're not adequately prepared, if you don't really have the technique down, or if you let yourself get too self-conscious, it can go the other way and you could actually play way worse and more mistakes happen. And so there is that side to it too. I wanted to be honest about that, and I think that's one of the reasons many adults shy away from that experience, because even if they're taking music lessons, in front of your teacher, you get there and you play it like a third worse than how you've been practicing, right? You might be practicing, sounding pretty decent. You get in front of your teacher, now it's like a third worse, right? It just regresses. And that's a very, very common thing that happens, especially with music teachers, because it's different from performing. That music teacher is listening for mistakes and is really scrutinizing what you're playing. And I don't know if that's it. I don't know if it's like knowing you're being judged. But it also is helpful when you realize that that's the way it is, and that most music teachers recognize that. They recognize that when you're by yourself in your room, you're able to play it at a better level, largely because you're not being distracted, right? You're completely in your element, you're completely comfortable, and there's no part of your brain that's siphoning off thinking, oh, what are they thinking? Or, how does it sound? Or, oh, I hope I don't mess up. All those things come to the surface more when you're playing in front of people, and when you're by yourself, that's just not the case. Okay, pardon me, I just realized that the fan was picking up here, and we're in the middle of a heat wave, but I'll sort of, sweat it out here for a little bit, take that fan away. So there is that side to it too, and when you know that in music lessons, it can be helpful, because typically over and over again, what does fall apart, that third that gets worse, is the third that needs to be worked on. So we can use that in music lessons, or you can use that for yourself. And this is part of what's great about getting up and performing. That when you get up and perform, if something does fall apart, it's typically the area that needs more work. And this can help you to learn and get more intimate if you can come from a non-judgmental, non-berating place, like, oh, messed up terribly, it was awful. It's like, no, it's just data. Okay, well, that section's not quite ready. That needs some more work. I'll go and dig in on that, and you have the motivation to do it at that point. Same thing with music lessons. You go to music lessons, and you thought you had this part down, but you don't. Well, typically it's the bridge on many songs, because you're only playing that, 1/3 of the amount of time if it's an AABA form, right? You're playing the other parts. It's the part that is being It can come down to such simple things as like, what are you not repeating as much? What sections of the song have you repeated more? Or, this is something that I was taught by one of my professors in Paris that was so smart, is like troubleshooting your own playing. Why am I having difficulty on this area? And then once you figure out what that is, you can solve the issue yourself. This is oftentimes what music teachers are doing for us. Like, oh, you're having a hard time because your fingering isn't quite right on that area. You need to work on your fingers on this point, and let's go en boucle. Let's repeat it a bunch of times in a row, right? You can learn how to learn from a music teacher and then take that on yourself. And that's one of the things that one of my instructors that I just adored. Maybe I'll talk about him sometime on a future podcast, that he absolutely drilled into me was problem solving your own playing, right? So let me talk about adults getting up in front of people. There's opportunities to do this. There's open mics. There's jazz jams. There's getting together with friends and jamming. Right? There's a lot of different ways to get yourself in community with your music and out of isolation. And I thoroughly, thoroughly recommend it. Now, many people, they're so humble, like I was saying, that they're like, oh no, this is just for me. Like, I'm nobody special. Why would I get out and share my music? And it doesn't have to be from that place, okay? It can be from a place of, number one, recognizing that it's going to help you to progress in a much faster manner and a more enjoyable manner. Okay, because like I said, when you get up and perform a song, even when you botch it completely, you're still actually making more progress than sitting in your room for, a month working on that same song. It's just something about it. You're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to experience it for yourself if you haven't. There's another thing, and it's the satisfaction of being heard, right? There's just the level of, for many of us, it's this case. If we've been in our rooms working silently and we're pretty content with that, maybe we're introverts, maybe we're not the type of people who need attention. Maybe these are more the people I'm speaking to because other people are already out. It's almost like the whole point of learning music is to get out and play it for other people. But for the ones that don't recognize that, even you might not realize it, will feel such a fulfillment sharing your voice with other people, especially in a safe place, a safe community, where people afterwards will be like, hey, good job, and you're not doing it for that, but it does, it satisfies something in us to be heard, whether somebody likes it or not. It's just nice to get out there and express yourself to a room full of people, or a few people, or even like I've done many times, just to the building or just to the area, to just be out sharing your voice with the collective in some way, shape, or form. It's, a sense of belonging. It's a sense of stepping up. It's a sense of not holding back. And it also strips you of many of the things. It gives you the ability to face many of these character things that we have to face, like the part of us that will want to get into competition, and the part of us that will want to berate ourselves, the part of us that will want to be the best in the room. All of that stuff gets drawn to the surface. So if you're serious about, being somebody who wants to face their shadow self, well, these are great opportunities to have that shadow self come up. For me, I would be practicing and practicing, and I'd feel so ready. And then sometimes I'd get in these scenarios and a whole other aspect of my personality would come out. And I remember in particular, my first year in New York, I found a wonderful open mic. I was there every week. I would go to a 4 a.m., top-notch musicians, such a fun scene. And then as the night went on, it would be more and more comedians, because the New York comedians would be out, at all the different open mics. They would go to like 5 in a night, and then they would land at this one because it was open till 4. And so they were just working material. So, oh my God, that first year in New York was just wonderful. It was across the street from a cafe I worked at, and that cafe ended up being such an interesting place too, and such a fun time. And in that place, I would find that I'd be sitting there and I'd be watching people all night get up on stage and just soak up the attention and be like, that's not me, that's not me. And then I would find that when I finally got on stage, it was hard to get off. Like, I would want to keep playing every time. I remember I told Nico, the sound guy, about it, and he would just sit back there and watch these. He was so great, such a good soul, and he made it such a safe, fun environment for all of us to be there. And he laughed so hard. I thought that was the funniest thing, because I was just got back there and I said, what is it about being up there that just makes you not want to get off? Because he was always having to kind of like pull the cane and get people off stage. And he thought that was hilarious. So, there's these open mics, these jazz jams. They're more than just you showing up, and showing off. Right? It's really about your own growth. It's really, the final reason. That particular open mic I was at, it was more about songwriters. So it would help me to finish songs. I had a reason to finish songs, which is one of the biggest things for songwriters, is a lot of times we have to put deadlines on to finish a song. It's one thing to start a song. That's super fun. It's much harder to actually finish a song. And a lot of times we need a deadline to do that. So these open mics, these song circles, whether they're, out at a place, whether they're online, whether they're with friends, whether they're high-level jazz jams, whatever it is, it being in some kind of community and getting up and performing, it's going to bring out the best of your playing. And there's a certain point where if you really do want to develop your voice and your talent, I highly recommend that you bring it in. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to want to do it, okay? Most of the time, you're not going to want to do it. But you will find if you will actually get out and start to participate in some of these things, that you will find it is so rewarding that then you do want to start getting out more. And you'll recognize what I'm talking about, this quality of uplifting your entire playing just by getting out and sharing your voice a little bit. You know what? Making your own videos, doing your own little YouTube channel, even if you have 5 people listening, same kind of thing. It's giving you external deadlines. It's bringing your craft out into the world, and the feedback loop back into your playing will elevate it far more than you can do completely in isolation. Now, if in isolation is the only way you can do it at this point, no problem. Stay there. As I mentioned, that book Mole Music demonstrates that we can be doing a lot just by learning an instrument in your room. So I don't want to shame anybody for not wanting to get out and do that. But if there's at all, if any of the words that I'm saying to you, if you feel a call to do that, then it might be time. And for the people who aren't ready, just keep in mind you might be at some point. That's certainly what happened to me. For like 5 years, I never intended to share my music with anybody, but there came a point where I realized I did. And when I did, the right opportunities showed up. I've been dreaming the last 4 years of doing an online mic, a very, very safe environment for people to come on once a month and share music, work on songs. The thing is that, I have to stay online at this point just due to my traveling situation. But I know many of us have gotten really tired of being online. But I will say that for a lot of adults, online is still the way to go because we just have too busy of a lifestyle, right? And just being able to click in online and click off online, sometimes that's just the best way to do it. And I've been exploring some different alternative platforms besides Zoom, since Zoom has gotten really bad with the sound technology. They just don't really care about music lessons, and it's not catered to that. And it seems like in the last year it's gotten way worse. So I'll have maybe more information on that. That's one of my big projects, is looking at a platform that would not only make online lessons like, a better experience, not to replace in-person lessons, because I absolutely think that person-to-person is the way to go. Performing in front of people is the way to go. I'm definitely way more into all of that. But I'm also into looking at the Rudolf Steiner version of technology. Like, technology is here, and there's times when it, is necessary and helpful, and how can we, not be a slave to the technology, but use the technology, be the masters of the technology. So I'm looking at platforms, and if that's the case, maybe I'll be able to launch soon an open mic, a safe space for people of all levels, to be able to come online and share a song once a month with each other. The final reason to do this is also the inspiration you get from hearing other musicians. And it is so true, because motivation is a factor, right? There's peaks and valleys. It's a long journey with music. Music is a metaphor, same thing with the spiritual journey. And there's times when you need to be inspired, you need to be motivated. Full circle moments can do so much for that, but you can't demand these full circle moments. So another way is just hearing other musicians, right? Now you can go and hear professional musicians, and a lot of times it's very inspiring. Like when I'm in front of an actual master's canvas, like Monet, like seeing Monet and Musée d'Orsay, I went home and painted for a week straight, just the pure inspiration of it. I've done the same thing as well when I've gone and heard like Brad Melder or Jackie Terrasson, or I've heard these greats. But there's other times when it can also be discouraging. So, sometimes we hear these masters play and it's like, oh, I will never sound like that. So might as well give up. So that's why it's also good to hear other musicians that are in process, in journey, different levels. And you just never know where that inspiration is going to come. But a lot of times it's just the courage that they had, the way that it was that I was inspired by these children playing. It wasn't that the song they played, per se, for some of them, it wasn't that I thought, oh, look at that technique and look at that song and oh my gosh, I want to play like that. It's not that. That's more of an envy, right? And that can be a motivator. Being jealous, you can turn that into like, why am I jealous of somebody? Well, that's something in me that I need to get in touch with, right? So you can flip envy and jealousy on its head that way. But even better is when you're inspired, when you just recognize that somebody is stepping into who they are in that moment, and they're living that fully, and they're not holding back. And it inspires you to do the same, to own wherever you're at, wherever level you're at, whatever styles you want to do in music, whatever voice you have to offer, you own it, you present that, and in that you recognize that you are doing everything you can to step up for the collective in a humble way, not trying to be somebody you're not, but just owning and embracing exactly who you are and stepping up in that way.